In this session, we're going to look at the trash module down here, second one along between the two filters. Now, trash is where all the distortion takes place, and distortion in serious amounts and in serious detail. What we have is we have two stages of distortion, stage 1 and stage 2. They can work either together or just one stage. Then we have a list of distortions we can start with. Basic blues driver, let's try a few. So we can go through those and try them out. Then we have the ability to go through then and do some alterations on it in some serious detail. We can choose these curves and push them and pull them. We can modify them, double click on them and create more curve areas. Can zoom in there and do some more detailed work. So we can, as I say, zoom into the four corners there and go through the different parts, or come straight back to the middle. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's the center point. And we can look at that in detail. Push it up and pull it back. And as you can see, as I'm adding my curve in, I'm changing this resultant curve here. So we have the base curve, and then we have my curve, and the changes will eventually give us the result. Clear that and go back to the beginning again. Different types of curve. There's the tension curve. A linear curve. Squares. This is seriously dirty. Then triangle waves. Sine wave. Quite squelchy, that one. And as you go through, you can do different things. Then we have the bipolar button. That allows us to either have just change one half of the waveform or both parts of the waveform by choosing bipolar. So, as I say, we can have both the positive and the negative affected. So if we go back again to our linear one, back to our tension one. So by default, it's always mirrored. But in bipolar mode, we have the ability to change on both sides of the waveform. And as you can see, you can create some pretty cool distortion effects. Now, if you're finding the effect too harsh, then you can turn on log mode, and that gives you a much more gentle way of affecting the waveform. So in non-log mode, on the whole, it'll always give you more subtle effects. Then we have DC filter, and that filters any DC offset bias out of the sound that can be created with the bipolar effects. So as I say, if you're going to use bipolar, you might want to use the DC filter to deal with any unwanted shapes that are coming in. So worth checking, turning that on and off and just checking whether it's helping to give you the sound that you want. Then we have the section where we have the preamp, the drive and the style. And sometimes style will show and sometimes it won't. If we choose tube drain, for example, that doesn't have styles, but smooth overdrive does, and that style gives us different variations on the filtering and the distortion effect. Preamp is basically your gain control. And that's worth using sometimes as well if you've used stuff before the trash and that's actually changed the gain structure within the unit, because obviously distortion depends on gain. So you can use that to push and pull the gain. That's your gain control. Drive is the amount of distortion. It's worth trying different styles. Quite nice, kind of just subtle. We have two stages, and sometimes you'll get an effect. Let's say, for example, you were a guitarist and you had a distortion pedal and an amp. That would be two-stage distortion, because you'd have the distortion at the start, then the amp doing the second part of it. And you can create that effect by using this two-stage effect. So you've got stage 1 and stage 2. So, for example, we come to stage 1, we could go for a nice distortion pedal sort of sound. Let's go for blues driver. And stage 2, we could come in and we could go into drive, go for capacity drive. So there's the sort of amp sound we've got. So I like that. Now the thing to remember is that stage 1 drives into stage 2. So you always need to get stage 1 set right first, because that determines what happens at stage 2. So stage 1, then into stage 2. And also remember as well that you have filters on both as well. So I've got a filter here. If I wanted to take some of that crispiness off stage 1, let's just turn stage 2 off for a second. I like that. So say distortion pedal on 1. I like that one. So as I say, stage 1, stage 2, check your shape out, do your filtering, and you can work between the two. So you don't need to have stage 1 on or stage 2 on. You can... So there's our amp. And there's our pedal. Or of course, if you're doing a synth or something else, or a drum sound, it'd be totally different again, or a vocal sound. We'll be looking at that when we go in our real world examples later on in this series. So as I say, stage 1, there's your presets. Come through and edit the shapes there. Then stage 2, but you don't have to use them both. Now for even more distortion effects, what we can use is multiband mode, which means we can apply different distortion to different parts of the sound broken into frequencies here. So I've bypassed it on the bottom end, and then I want to use some stuff on the mid and some stuff on the high mids here. We can change the frequencies in which it crosses over at. And then we can apply different distortions. So let's come to band 2 here. Can solo that. There's the top end. Let's go to there now. As you can see, get really into detail there. Come to the top end now, let's just solo that. Let's choose something for that to do. And we could go through and we could change each section in detail. So we've got different distortions and different settings on each of the bands there. Very helpful and very powerful. And that works for both stage 1 and stage 2. As you can see, multi-band mode on both of them working there. We can go back to a single band distortion, just like that. So you have a final output gain. Now sometimes you need to turn that down. If you've done a lot of driving at this end, you might want to turn it down here. Now we have a limiter to protect it, but use the limiter to help you. Don't just abuse the limiter. Otherwise you're going to crush the sound and not really get the dynamic range that you want. So as I say, then we have a mix between the original and there. That's mixing in stage 1. So there's a lot of changes you can make there to get the distortion that you want. You can get rid of the crispiness and get rid of the top end, or you can get rid of the bottom end. You can really push it. And depending on what sound you're using, and we'll be looking at that later on, you'll see that you can get some really cool effects. So there we are. That's the trash mode.